Welcome to iLearn Collaborative's Introduction to Blended Instruction webinar. I'm Cassidy Hetzel, and I'll be your webinar host and your program facilitator. I've been in education for 17 years now, 10 of which have been in the online environment. In 2011, when my husband and I were thinking about starting our family, we knew that I wanted to be at home as much as possible, and I knew that I also had some very big professional goals for myself as well. And so I made the choice to go back and earn my doctorate from Walden University in Educational Technology Specialist with the concentration of online learning. In addition to that, I've earned my master's degree in curriculum and instruction from University of Phoenix. And I'm currently the instructional coach and one of the English teachers at Jeffco's Virtual Academy in Jeffco Public Schools. One of my proudest moments was in 2017 when a group of my middle school students and my high school students got together and convinced my brand new principal, a principal that had never even worked with me, to go ahead and nominate me for Colorado's Blended Teacher of the Year. While I didn't win, it was such an honor to be respected and appreciated by my students, and to have my principal come back and say, your students were right, you deserve this. Was absolutely one of the most proudest moments of my life. And just knowing that my students saw how hard I was working to personalize the experience that they were having in their classroom with me, and really getting some exceptional growth out of my students and connecting with them on very personal levels. So that's just a little bit about me, but now we're going to get into the heart of our webinar. And today's webinar is going to be looking at defining blended instruction. We're going to help identify the models of blended learning and help you explore which one you think is the best place for you to start your blended instruction journey. And then we're going to look at how technology can be utilized to support blended instruction, and how really we can personalize and differentiate our lessons with technology and with the strategies and techniques of blended learning to improve our teaching overall. So why blended instruction? What is the point of blended instruction? So when we were thinking about why blended instruction is important, we really had four main images that came to mind. And we're going to start up in the upper left-hand corner with the kids on the tablet and the screens. So when we look at this image on the top left of the students on the screens, never before have we had the technological capabilities to see exactly where students are like we do now. Never before have we been able to get instant data on our students like we are able to do now. Never before are we able to connect students from our classrooms to each other. Never before have we been able to utilize collaboration with technology like we are today. And so really that's why we want to look at blended learning. We want to look at being able to become responsive and personalized teachers for each student. We want to customize the learning path for each one of our kids. We want to make sure we're meeting them where they are and helping them to get where they could be. Which really leads us to the picture on the upper right with the kids and the globe. Never before have we had a chance to be so connected with all of the world. When we think about what happened in the spring, when we think about COVID teaching, what we did in the spring was not blended instruction. I want you to hear me say that it was not virtual instruction. It was not blended instruction. It was not remote instruction. It was crisis instruction, meaning we did the best we could with what we had in the amount of time we could do it. But now it's time for us to bring accountability back in, rigor back in, and really start connecting our students in the online virtual blended environment, because never before have we been able to connect outside of just the United States before. Now we can go worldwide. We could be connecting with schools that are also going through lockdowns, also going through different experiences. And beyond COVID, we've never had the ability to create and collaborate with the world like we do now. The world is our stage, so to say, and we can collaborate in numerous ways. But now we're going to switch down to that bottom left. And when we think about being connected, we also have to think about the equity issues and making sure that everyone has that same access and availability to our instruction, to our content. And so really blended instruction is also helping to provide a space that is outside of the traditional classroom where your content, where your class information can be viewed and be available, because learning doesn't just happen from 7 to 3. Learning needs to be able to happen whenever the student is ready to be in the learning environment. And so we want to really make sure that we are putting our content and our materials in an online space so that they have access to it when it's convenient for them. And when we start thinking about why are we putting our content available all the time, what are we doing? Well, really, it's about our fourth image over on the bottom right. We are trying to prepare our students for jobs and for a future that we don't even know what it's going to look like yet. We have to be constantly changing and adapting and developing so that we can meet the needs of the future. And so that's really the focus of why blended instruction is so important. When we think about blended instruction, we want to have a clear definition. And the best way to define blended learning is that students have control over some aspect of the place of the learning, the time of the learning, the path of the learning, or the pace of the learning. So in place, are they doing the learning online, hybrid, or are they in a virtual environment? The time frame, are they allowed to take the course just in the morning because they have other afternoon expectations? If they are on a different learning path, maybe they're on the path for technology, vocational skills rather than the traditional high school diploma, or control over the pace, how fast the course is moving. I'm currently teaching a summer school course of a 16-week course that's put down to 4 weeks. And so this is a very accelerated course where students understand that each day of the course is equal to 1 week worth of material. So your students have control over place, time, path, or pace. That's the real basic definition for blended instruction. But students learn both in brick and mortar situations and as well as supervised online environments. Especially with remote learning, we don't know what our classrooms are going to look like in the fall. And so blended instruction is a great way for you to begin implementing the remote learning. It's going to give you a starting place on how to organize your materials, your resources using Google Classroom or Schoology. And then we really want to also provide integrated experience with any of the connected services needed for that student. So if the student's on an IEP, we want to make sure our learning specialists are connected to that student with ease. We want to make sure counseling services are connected with that student. We really want to try to make as many connections and crossover points within our programs as possible. So the more you can interact with the team supporting the student, the better. So when we think about blended learning, one of the things that we hear most often from teachers is that I'm looking forward to the student-centered environment, to have it be personalized learning for my students so they have ownership, because I want it to be competency-based. I don't want to just be moving forward. These are all positive words that are associated with blended learning. And so these words are what you should be looking for and being excited for with adding in blended learning to your instruction. So one of the things about blended learning is that it's really held under the umbrella for universal design for learning. And UDL is based on 3 big competencies and 3 big principles. And that is that students need multiple means of engagement. They need multiple ways to get involved in your classroom. It cannot just always be the same interaction for that student. They need new ways of interacting with you, the teacher, and the content. So providing options for them with how they engage in the course. Students need multiple means of representation, meaning students can't just look at one video or one example and be expected to learn from that. They need multiple means of representation. So adding a video, adding a PDF, adding a graphic organizer, a flow chart, supporting the learning with extra resources and multiple ways of viewing those representations of the content. And then the third one is action and expression. Action and expression. Students need to be able to show their learning in multiple ways. You shouldn't just have one assignment for every student to do, that the student should have choice and voice behind how they're showing you their learning. These slides up here are interactive, so if you need to learn more about Universal Design for Learning and the 3 basic principles, please go to CAST.org and peruse their sites. Again, remember, that's kind of how this program is working, is we're going to populate tons and tons of really great resources for you. Then we're going to give you time to look at those resources, a person to support your learning. Hi, that's me. And then you can come back and we can try to implement some of that learning. And when we're talking about Universal Design for Learning, we're not just talking about how assignments are set up. We're talking about how buildings are set up. We're making sure that students can be successful from the ground up. It's putting way more supports and differentiation possibilities and opportunities together than you may ever need, but because you don't know what your students are going to need, having all those resources makes the differentiation process easier, and it allows you to supplement the resources that you need for the individual students, providing that better personalized learning experience. So under the big umbrella of Universal Design for Learning is also that idea of competency-based, using proficiency scales, which we'll get into, the idea of blended learning, project-based learning, personalized learning. All of these big ideas and pedagogies really line up under Universal Design for Learning. So if you don't know much about Universal Design for Learning yet, that's definitely something I want you to spend some time on, because it's the basis for everything we're doing. So today's webinar, what we're really going to be focusing on is we're going to be looking at the degrees of blended learning. And really today we're going to be focusing over here on the station rotation model and the flipped classroom model. And so as we go through the rest of this webinar, yes, we will look at the flex, the enriched, and the a la carte model, but I want to spend our time on the station rotation and the flip model, because this is where most educators feel comfortable starting. And the flex, enriched, and a la carte can always have strategies and techniques pulled out of it and added into station rotation and the flipped classroom. So we will be spending most of our time on station rotation and the flipped, but I will give you a little bit of background information on the a la carte, enriched, and the flex. But know, if you are an electives teacher or you're a teacher that's already familiar with blended learning, that there are more resources in our course and in the materials that walk you through more of the specifics of flex, enriched, and virtual. But because most educators really feel most comfortable starting with the station rotation and the flipped classroom, that's where I'm going to spend my time today in our webinar. So we're going to start with the station rotation. Station rotation usually happens in a brick and mortar school. Station rotation integration can happen on one of 3 different levels. It can happen on an individual teacher level, it can happen on a team level, or it can even happen on a school level. So we're going to first focus on the teacher side of things, working just within one classroom, but you can eventually get to station rotation for team teaching and for the entire school, just depending on your space and time allotment. But so within the teacher's classroom, the teacher is going to set up a classroom environment where students are going to rotate through groups at different times in the classroom, focusing on different skills. There may or may not be an entire full group mini lesson or instructional period. If you find that you need to have an instructional period with the teacher before going into the rotations, then you'll want to do that mini lesson before you send students out to the rotation stations. You can also choose to have a teacher-led station where you just work with small groups. So you may not need a full teacher-led station at the beginning. You may want to incorporate a rotation with the teacher as a check-in point, as a comprehension check on the student's understanding. Because again, one of the biggest things about being a blended learning instructor is to be a responsive instructor. And so we really want to get to know your students on a very personal level. And we want to offer them choices and voices based on their personal choices and their experiences. And so now we're going to go through an example with a 4th grade elementary teacher. And so in station 1, this is an independent led station where the teacher is doing a mini lesson in front of the entire group. And the teacher gives the students here in this example, the students are working on adverbs. And so they are looking at what adverbs are, what the definition is, what do they look like in action, can students identify the adverbs? And so to begin, the teacher is going to do a mini lesson on all of those basics, on the basics of what is an adverb. And to do that, she's going to give the kids a piece of paper and fold that into 4 sections. And she's going to label 3 of the sections, how, when, and where. Then students are going to independently write sentences demonstrating how, when, and where adverbs in each section are being used. And so they're going to have some actual practice. Again, this is kind of mimicking that I do, we do, you do. So she's giving them that basic start. And then after that beginning mini lesson, she's going to divide students up into 2 different stations. And within this station, the first group of students is going to be working on one item, and the second station is going to be working on the other item. And then halfway through the class period, they will switch and they will take over the other stations that they need to do. So in station number 1, they are going to be playing the Turtle Diary online game of Spot the Adverb. And so they will be going over here and playing this game of Spot the Adverb. Again, this is great practice, allowing students to gamify their learning. And so they get to practice without any, let's say, without any pressure. It's okay if they don't get it right, as long as they keep trying. And so they're going to keep playing this game and practicing. They're going to have each students with a baggie and note cards, and they're going to have samples, and they're going to have a sample sentence with no adverb, and then the students are going to have to come up with appropriate adverbs that could fill into that space after playing the game. Then students will turn in their sentences as their exit ticket for that station. Then students at the other station will switch and go do that. And the students that we were just at playing the Spot the Adverb game will then be moved over to the different station where they're going to be watching the Grammopolis video adverb song. So they get to watch this. They're learning more about adverbs. They're having fun. They're enjoying online content while experiencing learning more about the adverb. And so then after they do this, they're going to look at the adventures of adverbs. And again, this is just more practice. As you're working through and creating station rotations, one of the most important things to remember is that each of your stations is about the equal length of time. We don't want one station finishing up way ahead of another, and we don't want one station going way over our time limit either. So that's a 4th grade example. Let's take a look at a 7th grade example now. And so this is from an English class. And so here the teacher again is going to start with a mini lesson. Students already are working and reading novels where they've had choice and voice in which novel they want to read. So students should already be more engaged in the book because they got to choose which book they were reading. And we're creating blogs in this example. And so we're looking at what goes into a blog. We're looking at blog requirements. We're looking at what really needs to go into a blog, what needs to go if we're writing a summary, what needs to go into a summary. And then at the end of this day, they're going to actually post a summary of some writings to their blog. And so in the first station rotation, we're just going over the expectations in a mini lesson of what goes into a blog, what goes into a summary. I'm going over that I do, we do, you do. So I'm giving them that designated teacher support. Then I'm going to send them out into different stations. And if I wanted to here, I could even add a fourth station where I add in another teacher comprehension check. But so for station 2, the first group of students is going to be spending their time watching the silly Lucy and Ethel video, wrapping chocolates where they keep popping them into their mouth. We're going to look at that. We're going to talk about the summary. We're going to look at that summary chart worksheet. We're going to look at filling that out as a partner group. And then they're going to turn in their partner summary sheet together as an exit ticket. In the third station, students are then going to be looking at how to write a summary. They're going to be looking at some examples. They're going to be looking at some written text. And then they're going to have that chance to write their summary, and then they could go into that teacher comprehension check station as well. So when we're thinking about station rotation models and how to plan for these, you really, really want to make sure you have your good teaching skills set in place ahead of time. In-class basic expectations are important. Make sure you know how your kids are transitioning before stations. Are they leaving the laptops on the table? Are they taking them with them? Having those good classroom expectations and setup will just help this run smoother. But you really want to make linear agendas for your class. So one thing is not waiting for something else to build on it. You want to be able to do any of the activities in any order to be able to build off of it. And so if for like that teacher, that last one, if we added in that teacher station, maybe you want to pull your most struggling writers and have them start with the teacher first and have them create an outline before they even get to the other stations. There's lots of different ways of planning extra scaffolded support for differentiation. Again, that's where that universal design for learning really comes into play, is have more resources and more materials and more activities than you may need, because that way you'll be able to differentiate them out for any given student at any given point, and you'll be able to be that much more responsive to their needs. Be prepared to use something from one station in the next activity. You can build off of things. You can also have one station rotation lead into another station rotation for the next day. So after they finish these assignments on this day, then there's a next big step. And so the activities change with when the students are ready for that next step. You also want to think about how you can turn other activities into stations. Instead of making something teacher-led, maybe you could do a mini lesson, or maybe you could have videos, or maybe you can do an exploration activity or a web quest. Really what we're trying to do is take the sage on the stage and reduce that. We want it to take our sit and get learning and reduce it. We want the students interacting with the learning. We want the students doing the explorations. We want to bring back the wonder into the learning. Students don't just want to have everything spoon-fed to them. There's fun in the learning process, in understanding that your ideas and understandings change and evolve, and that you can add to things and you can change perspectives. Really think about what supports and materials your students need to be successful, and then overpopulate for that. Think about those, the scaffolded supports that you could create, or the executive functioning supports that you could create, and really try to offer as many supports as possible. So now we're going to get into the flipped classroom. And the flipped classroom is something that's a little strange at first for teachers to take on, and it's because the students have to be trained a little bit in the flipped classroom before they're going to be successful with it. And so know that the more and more you start using the flipped classroom, the better and better your students will get with the format. And the flipped classroom is where we are taking something that would normally be presented on the stage style, And instead, we're going to take our instructional time and we're going to give that back to the teachers, because we're going to send the students home with a little bit of pre-learning to do before they come to our course. This again is done both in brick and mortar schools and online schools. I'm going to show you an example from my 6th grade classroom at Jeffco's Virtual Academy here in a minute. But this is also where a lot of teachers feel comfortable getting blended learning as part of their own instruction and part of their own professional development. This is where we can respect and honor the time of our learner and trust that they're going to do the necessary learning ahead of time to come to class prepared for the more hands-on, the more fun, the more creating, analyzing, evaluating, rather than the knowledge building background. They're coming in to do more of the fun hands-on things than the informational pieces. So what we're going to look at now is an example from my 6th grade classroom at Jeffco's Virtual Academy. And again, this resource is something that you are welcome to use and share out with other teachers, and maybe you're an instructional coach, maybe you're a principal. Feel free to know that you can use this with your staff as professional development. But really what we're doing with the flipped classroom is we're taking that Bloom's taxonomy pyramid and we're flipping it upside down. And again, we're changing it so that we're doing the remembering and understanding before class, so that we can get to the applying and analyzing, evaluating, and creating during and after class. Okay, so at my school, my 6th grade class is very small. I only had 6th grade students that came to campus. At Jeffco's Virtual Academy, we roughly have about 1,300 students, only of which 300 are full-time. The rest of the students are part-time students with us, where they have another school and they're just taking 1 or 2 courses with us. So these 6th graders are part of that full-time student. These are students that are not in the traditional classroom for a reason. Many of these kiddos have been bullied. Many of them have anxiety and depression, or SEL struggles. And so with this small group of 6th graders, I only get to see them for 45 minutes once a week. Now, they come to campus once a week on Wednesdays from 9 to 2, but on that time, during that time, they're going through SEL, counseling, core rotations. So I only get about 45 minutes with my students of actual one-on-one teaching time. And so I don't want to spend my 45 minutes of teaching time being a sage on the stage. I want to be interacting. I want to be having fun with my students. I want to help them be exploring. And so what I've done is I have asked my students to do some flipped learning. And so this is an example that comes from my actual 6th grade classroom. And you can see that Monday and Tuesday is where I expect them to do their flipped learning. Wednesday is our on-campus day. And then on this week, we had testing on Thursday and Friday. And so this is an example of just kind of how I set up my course, how I expect my students to work, kind of what it looks like, this pacing guide. But really, we're starting with, I want my students to do the background knowledge and the background building of what is author's purpose. It's all about pie. And if you know, author's purpose is to persuade, inform, or entertain. And so I'm trying to get my students to do that background knowledge of what is author's purpose at home before they come see me, so that when they come to see me on Wednesday, we can do a fun hands-on activity. So you can see that the first thing that my students get each week is their learning targets. And each week my students have to interact with those learning targets in some way. They have to know that they are going to be meeting these learning targets, and that they have to have evidence at the end of the week to prove that they've learned and met these learning targets. And so the first thing that they do is they have to put their learning objectives into their own words. We're going to look at how they're going to show me how they can provide evidence through our scavenger hunt. And so when they come face to face, that's where they're going to show me that they can prove that they've met the learning targets from Monday and Tuesday when we're together in person. And So the first thing that I do is I tell them, okay, you need to learn about author's purpose. You have choice and voice in how you learn about author's purpose. You can watch this video, you can watch a PowerPoint, you can read the handout, or you can do all of the above. Step 2, take notes. Your notes need to be thorough, but how you take notes is up to you. Maybe you want to do handwritten notes. Maybe you want to do 2-column notes in Google Docs. Maybe you want to do sketch notes. That's fine. I have one overarching rubric that meets, if the student did a good job of taking notes, these things would be in it. And then that way, no matter what format the notes come in, if the student meets those expectations, I can grade it on the same rubric. So after they do that exploration, they're going to, excuse me, after they've done the exploration on what author's purpose is, they're going to get some practice in on author's purpose. They're going to use this flow chart to go through and help identify what is author's purpose and what is entertaining, when is it meaning to persuade, and when is it meaning to inform. And so we do lots of little short examples of pictures. They look at advertisements, they look at movie posters, all sorts of things, just to follow the flow chart to get the hang of it. Then they're going to play the author's purpose game, which is a battleship. There's Battleship, there's a Sorry game, but this is letting them play and practice with the concepts before they ever come to see me. Then they have to take a quiz, and this is where I get to be a data responsive and responsible teacher, because before they even come in, I'm going to have an idea of what questions on the quiz did they get right, which questions did they get wrong. I allow students to then ask questions on the quiz, to send me emails. It's an exit ticket just for me to be making sure I know what the questions are, so that when they come see me on Wednesday, I can spend about the first 5 to 10 minutes just addressing those questions, clearing up misconceptions, and then we can get to the hands-on activity, which was going for a scavenger hunt. And so in our school, we only have a 3-little building temporary setup in a parking lot of an elementary school. And so we used the elementary school. We went through the elementary school looking at the parking lot signs, the movie signs, the classroom signs, the lunch lady signs, and they had to go through that flow chart and practice and tell me what the author's purpose was for all these real life examples of author's purpose. And then at the end of the day, after our scavenger hunt, we always want to make sure that we are checking in with students and knowing how they feel about their learning. And so this is just a really quick example of one way that I was checking in with my students on how they felt things were going. If they give you a thumbs up, that means they're feeling good and I'm totally with you. Thumbs down means that, Hetzel, I'm totally lost and I need support. And a thumbs in the middle means I need help. I'm not sure I get this. If they submit anything other than the thumbs up, I'm sending them a personal email. I'm calling them. I'm helping them walk through. I'm talking about their misunderstandings. We're personalizing that learning experience for them. And so that is the flipped classroom. And another, when we're thinking of flipping lessons on what we need to remember and integrate, is that we really want to locate the part of the content that you want to flip. What is more building knowledge and informational that the students could do on their own before coming to you, so that you can spend your classroom time on much more of the active learning portion of the learning, rather than the sit and get portion necessarily. How are you going to deliver that online content? So whether you're using Google Classroom or Schoology, making sure your students know where the space is to go for that, making sure they're comfortable getting there, navigating in, utilizing that space. And then make sure you really clearly state the expectations. Give them a pacing guide of when the work should be done, what needs to be done at home, what do they need to come prepared for in class. And you also need to know as a teacher, especially the first 2 times, 3 times that you're trying a flip lesson, it's not going to go perfectly. The students need to practice this. It takes time to get used to, because this is not how education has been running. And so we do need to provide that opportunity in the classroom for those students that may have been less successful with the flipped classroom model the first time around, second time around. Give them the opportunity to still complete the lesson, the flip portion, but just give them the know that because you didn't have this ready, you're not going to get to do that hands-on portion, and that each time students are going to get better and better because they're going to understand that the learning that they're doing is getting more fun, it's getting more exciting, they're getting more hands-on. So don't be frustrated. Don't give up on the flipped classroom if it doesn't go perfectly the first time. Kids need to practice, and so do you. And as you build your confidence, students will build their confidence as well. But once you decide what you want to give during the flipped lesson, make sure that your in-class activity reinforces that learning, but then takes that learning to a new level of fun, hands-on, getting to do something that they wouldn't have been able to do in a previous environment with you. Because they did this learning at home, it opens up the opportunity to do what? You will really want to think about facilitating and encouraging class discussions and activities to really flourish that collaboration. Remember, we really want to start getting our kids used to, we're not just turning in an assignment and being done. It's not just a one and done activity, that we're constantly working to improve, to change, to implement, and that we want to work together to make those changes, because if we work together, we can make more happen more quickly and more successfully. It's easier on everyone as well. And then we really want to reflect on that instructional learning experience and modify your next lesson before you try again. And it's just about try again, and make sure we're not taking off too much at the beginning. Simplify, small bites, small pieces of content for your students to try in a flipped environment first. Okay, so now we're going to get into the flex, a la carte, and enriched models a little bit. So when we're talking about the flex model, this is really where teachers meet with students face-to-face at least 2 days a week, and then online on other times. Teachers utilize the online content resources to deliver their instruction, meaning when students come in to the flex days, teachers are doing more of that hands-on. So they're presenting material to students online, but then when students get to come to campus, they're interacting with that material, they're analyzing, they're reading, they're creating, they're evaluating, they're doing the learning, they're having the hands-on the learning. And then when you're in the flex environment, you can have lots of different things happening in one place. The important thing to remember with the flex environment is that these students and this environment is designed to provide the support that the student needs. It's not about what the teacher wants. It's not about what the program needs necessarily. It's all focusing on the individual student needs. So you're going to have lots of options because each student is going to be different. Maybe one student needs intervention in one room. Maybe one student needs to be doing a science lab that they missed with your science teacher. Maybe there's a counseling session happening in one room. Maybe there's a social area happening for students that are caught up. Maybe there's a central learning lab going on in the center of the classroom. All of the different resources that you would need for that program, for that kiddo, are available in one space at one time. When we're looking at the a la carte model, the a la carte model is predominantly online or usually in an elective classroom. Electives teachers are usually the ones more familiar with the a la carte and having kind of multiple things happening in one space. And so while students are predominantly online, the student schedules interact with a mix of online and face-to-face. So maybe this is you have an open classroom Monday, Wednesday, and Friday where students can drop in for 2 hours at a time to work on their wood project. And then the rest of the time, the content is online. Students can participate in learning that takes place remotely or on site, but it provides options and opportunity for students in multiple ways. The enriched virtual option is really kind of where we started with crisis learning in the spring. This is where brick and mortar schools are starting to offer content online and offer blended delivery. This is those Zoom breakout rooms and live meetings that you guys were trying to have. This is you setting up live sessions. This is teachers working to have all content provided online so that no matter what's happening in the traditional classroom, students can access it outside of the traditional classroom day. Students can access the content from home rather than having to be in the school. And so this is where I see a lot of teachers going back and getting to here in the fall. But we need to start by thinking about how we can add back in our accountability and rigor so that we create actual blended learning environments and not just that same crisis learning that was in the spring. So this is upping that expectation and bringing back the accountability and the rigor to our classes while offering a way for students to interact with our content outside of our traditional building, outside of our traditional hours. You can always go in and look at the examples in the materials, but the last thing that we're going to focus on today is the shifting roles in a blended environment and the differences between technology integration and blended instruction. And so when we think about teachers and the roles of teachers and students, we really want the role of teacher to shift from being sage on the stage to instead being a motivator, an encourager, a celebrator, a tutor, almost a coach, that you are helping the student identify their individual lacking and supporting them through that. We want students to own their own learning. We want to have teachers facilitate deep learning and discussions and collaboration. And we want students owning their data, not just from the state, not just from their school, but from where they are around the world with their peers. We want students to understand that they can change what their data says by how hard they're working, by what they're trying, what they're doing. We want teachers to be designing problem-based opportunities. We want extensions for learning. We want opportunities for students to become a collaborator and a communicator and a creator and a researcher in their learning experience. So again, taking away some of that sage on the stage power and instead empowering our students to be self-directed, to own their learning, to be wanting to learn more for their own sake. And we really want to try to differentiate, personalize, and assess our students with actionable feedback. Again, that's us being that responsive teacher. And then when we're thinking about that technology integration versus blended instruction, we're really looking at moving beyond just taking the kids to a computer lab to research. Instead, we're having the students look at research. They're posting that research in an online space to get peer feedback. They're modifying that research. They're taking the learning to another level. We want them to be utilizing technology for increased student engagement, but we really want to move it to that the teachers are working with the students, so we're getting teacher to student and student to student interaction. We want to change how our students are collaborating to make the process even more effective. We want to take the collaboration and help us move to deeper learning. We're not just using clickers to have students answer questions anymore. We're having our students analyze and respond to those results from that clicker poll. And they're posting those results and they're modifying their theories and their claims because of what they're finding. And then we don't just want students playing an online game just because. We want students understanding that playing that online game is taking them to deeper understanding and that they can understand what they were doing wrong, how they fixed it, that they know the reasons for the learning, that they know the why behind the learning. It helps the practicing in a less stressful environment. And it's a great place to provide extra feedback. In giving them the chance to try, you can build in extra scaffolded supports for them. So a few things just as we finish up here. Our course, please just know if you need help, you need flexibility, you need an extra little bit of time on a deadline, please just reach out to me. I'm always happy to be flexible. I just really want to know and keep up with what's going on with you. And always know that you can reach out. You can also stop by office hours anytime that you would like. It's again 9 to 10 in the morning. And you are welcome to stop by. We can brainstorm. We can think about the implementation process. Really, I'm just here to support you. And again, we're trying to give you so many resources and time to go through those resources and a person to think through those resources. So know that's who I am, and that's my role here for you, and that I'm really excited to be working with you all. So please get in touch if you need anything. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.